All right, team. We are back in the Fireside PM podcast, and I have a former colleague, Adam Sheppard, on the show
Hi, Tom.
today. Good to see you, Adam.
You too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, you've always struck me as someone who's constantly curious about where technology is going. And I still remember when I first joined Microsoft in like 03, 04, there was someone who said to me like, you should subscribe to the Shep Report. And I was like, what's the Shep Report? And they're like, oh, this guy, he's always talking about cool stuff that's around the corner. So it sounds like that has not ended and you're still frontiersman.
Yeah, it's funny. The older and wiser you get, maybe the more you start to figure out kind of your true nature a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I am a curious person, I can't help myself. I really enjoy thinking about what's next and how things might be in the future, and then building those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that Shep Report ended up being the very pivotal part of my career where I was getting frustrated at Microsoft. As you may remember, back in the day, MSN was struggling to figure out what it was and how it fit into the world, and what the the internet and MSN compared to some of the other cash cows at Microsoft. It was a very different product, and really a set of experiments, I would say. And I started wanting to create an outlet, a creative outlet, where I could say, here's some things that are going on outside of the bubble that I think we should be paying attention to. And here's why I think it's relevant to Microsoft. That ended up being a really important part of my career. It, Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer started interacting. They started, that helped raise the bar for me in terms of the kind of content I was focusing on. But it opened up a lot of doors for the rest of my career. And having recently revived it, it's a lot of work, but I enjoy it. It helps me kind of reflect on the world we're in, and especially during these very exciting times.
Do you remember what Bill G or Ballmer, like what resonated with them? Was there a particular topic that you were covering that they were curious about?
I think the first time Bill responded was I'd written a piece about Encarta, and I don't know if it was Wikipedia was just taking off, or there was a lot of multimedia starting to be really just going beyond just these encyclopedias that were shipped on CD-ROM at the time. And I felt we had an opportunity to build something similar, or at least to take Encarta into an online form, which of course it did over time. But it was short interactions. He added a few VPs and GMs onto the thread, and I probably was up most of that night kind of formulating responses, making sure I was buttoned up and giving something that was actually valuable and interesting. But
that's like given the Microsoft culture back then, like that's getting an email from Bill G is like being touched by a higher power, man. Good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun.
And so let's kind of fast forward a little bit to maybe the last couple of years. Like, what have you been up to? And I certainly your Substack post about exploring different tools definitely caught my eye. But tell me a little bit about what the last couple of years have been like for you.
So having left Microsoft, I spent 10 years as an entrepreneur, basically with a small R&D lab called 8/9. We were specialists in web and mobile development, especially the UX and the hardcore engineering to go explore interesting kind of fresh snow. 8/9 of an iceberg hidden below the water. And we wanted to focus on just the things that were kind of hidden out of view and on the cutting edge. And we did that for 10 years, 6 years in web and mobile. And then we pivoted into AR and VR and worked on all that first wave, or the 2014 wave of technologies like HoloLens and the Vive and Quest. Managed to sell that company, which was a very bumpy road because of, AR and VR really it's still a very nascent early tech, but we learned a lot along the way. And, frankly, it's still a space I'm very excited about, see a lot of potential with. Meta just showed a bunch of super exciting stuff today. And obviously Apple's in the game now as well. But after selling that company, as an entrepreneur, that was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. 10 years, 12 to 15 employees, an acquisition, constantly as a technologist, I was not only focusing on the experiences, the technology, the applications we were building, but also the business development and thinking about how to keep the business alive, how to keep us all my team making sure their wages were taken care of. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you really have to make some serious sacrifices. And we made a ton of mistakes along the way, got a ton of learning. There were some things I would do differently if I were to do it again, which I'll talk about maybe as we get into more of the AI entrepreneurship stuff. But since that was 2018, we sold the company. Since then, I had a small stint during the pandemic running emerging technology at Starbucks. And then a good friend of mine, Chris Kemp, who started Astra Space, reached out and said, hey, I'd love for you to run our user experience at Astra. We're launching rockets every day. We've got visual interfaces for the launch procedures, for visualizing Cape Canaveral and Kodiak, Alaska, for the spaceports there. Do you want to come join the team? And the very next day I was there. So that was a wild ride. They've had their own ups and downs, but something I'm really proud of and really enjoyed my experience there. Now I'm independently consulting while I kind of figure out exactly how and where I want to play in this AI space. And so while I'm not consulting, I'm working on my own entrepreneurial endeavors. And that was the kind of the recent post I made around some of the experimentation there.
Oh, this is great. I definitely want to get to the experimentation. Yeah. Before I do that, there's so much that I wanted to double click into. I guess the first one was, tell me a little bit about your views on AR, VR, like in terms of where you think it's going. Because I think a lot of us would say like, wow, it doesn't seem to have changed the world as much as maybe,
sure.
Let's say Zuckerberg thought it was going to, at least initially. To your point, like, it's not like they're not investing in there, but it seems like AI has overtaken AR, VR. Like, do you think we're not yet reaching like there's like another inflection point for AR, VR, or will be like a slow burn? What do you think?
I do. And I think some of that was shown with Project Orion, which was shown today. It's been a project that has been going for a number of years here in Redmond in Washington. Michael Abrash is their chief scientist there. They've spent billions, if not tens of billions, on R&D, some of the best minds in the world working on this stuff. In my mind, it is really what's happening is AI is actually going to be an accelerant for this. It's the combination of these technologies that is actually going to fulfill on its full potential. And so, what you can think of here is you go about your everyday life, you have a wearable or multiple wearables of different kinds. It might be glasses, it might be a small form factor camera, almost like a button that is connected and is able to capture the world around you. But capturing the world around you, having the AI also in a modality where it can view that what you're seeing and add context into either a heads-up display or into your earbuds, that is, I think, a superpower. I think it will honestly change everything. And while I think there's always going to be room for some kind of a mobile form factor, I think the predominant way we will experience the real world or enhance the real world in a number of contexts, it's not going to be totally ubiquitous, but I think it will become the new norm. And it's really a matter of the form factor, solving some of the hard physics problems, as well as things like high-speed connectivity, 5G, 6G, or whatever the next G networks will be, as well as these LLMs that are essentially that kind of little whisperer in your ear that are giving you more context and information about the world around you. And you saw some of that today with Orion, as well as the Meta glasses, which have some of the early rudimentary aspects of that are pretty exciting.
Yeah, so you're still bullish on it.
Super bullish.
Super bullish.
Yeah, I have zero doubt it will come to pass. Yeah.
Well, why did things like Google Glass not kind of break through? Because they had a lot of the early inklings of what you're describing.
And we actually developed for it. We did some driving and traffic kind of alerting applications for it. So we were pretty excited about the ecosystem and experimenting with that. I think timing is everything with technology. Microsoft, we had in the Palm Pilot years, we had Windows mobile phones that were very capable. We even had writable tablets before the iPad. Most of the time with technology, it's about timing. It's about the human factors play a massive part, especially with wearables. People are extremely sensitive to things being on their faces, and rightly so. Things like, your eyes are how you experience the world. And when you have something that is in any way interruptive of that, or is, having to be disintermediated in some way, you better have the best possible experience available. And things like battery life, heat, processing speed, internet connectivity, I think a lot of those things were working against Google Glass. And that was still an incredible technology when it launched. And really a lot of the enterprise use cases of it still have a lot of value. There's a whole bunch of derivatives of Google Glass now, things like you're working on electrical engineering or aerospace, and you want to bring up documents that are relevant, just simple PDFs. I think just, the fact that there was just this little 2D heads-up display in one lens was ahead of its time. And, it's a shame. I know Google has taken several runs at this. They'll build a team, they'll kill the team, they'll build a team, kill a team. I'd love to see them get back in the game. I'm sure they are in some capacity or another. But the one slight nuance that I am kind of thinking we might see sooner or later is actually less about interrupting the visual experience and is more about, as I mentioned before, some kind of a low profile, long battery life wearable camera that is constantly taking pictures, video streams, whatever you like. It's constantly viewing what you're seeing, is able to listen in where it's legal and appropriate in order to do so, and essentially use audio cues as earbuds as a way for you to interact and to analyze what's going on in the world. So I think you're going to see a lot more of these kind of AI wearables or aspects of some of these, the kind of the longer term vision that will come to fruition pretty quickly. And there's actually a lot going on in the hacking community around this space as well.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I guess I feel like if we can get the hardware a little bit lighter and longer lasting, it's just going to be too darn useful not to do it. And I remember there were a lot of initial backlash against people using Google Glass because the other people would feel like, hey, you know, this thing is
Of
like
course. Yeah.
watching me or whatever. It feels a little bit like the AI note takers. Like initially it was a little awkward when you jump on a meeting and then someone's
Yeah.
Fireflies thing was there or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
And now it's like, whatever, go ahead, record. I don't really care. Everybody's going to bring
Yeah.
their own AI assistant anyway. So yeah, it's who are you most bullish on? Because it seems like obviously Google's always been interested in this area. Meta's putting, you know, billions of dollars into it. Apple has like a really high end device.
Yeah.
I'm sure Microsoft has stuff in the works, or you know, where who do you think will be the winner, or will it be someone that we don't know, that just, you know, some new company?
It's a little bit of anyone's guesses. I have, you know, some opinions. You know, OpenAI and Johnny Ive's company, Love
Oh
From,
yeah,
I think they're now pretty public that they're working on a
yeah.
collaboration for that kind of wearable plus AI combination. That's maybe not a glasses form factor. I would put my money that they will launch something pretty impressive in the next couple of years. Maybe, who knows? It's always a losing game to try and predict when anything will launch. But I think the caliber of and opportunity to create an AI focused wearable will likely come from that direction. In the near term, I'm extremely bullish on Meta to actually be kind of the market leader probably for the next, you know, 2 to 5 years. I think they're ahead of most. No one else has spent the same level of investment, maybe other than Apple, on that particular segment. And Apple, as we all know, is a fast follower. You know, they will refine to the nth degree and create the most compelling experience for the largest consumer market. So maybe at some point they will lead as well, but I'd be surprised if they were the first to market with something similar to Orion, but in a kind of smaller form factor.
And do you think, Adam, do you think whoever is the winner, do you think the biggest economic value created will be the consumer use case, or will it be industrial or enterprise or business?
Longer term, I think it'll be as big as the smartphone. So I do think everyone who has a smartphone will have a pair of smart glasses if they're capable and able to. And so that's probably the consumer market. Enterprise is, you know, I've worked on a number of enterprise use cases in retail, in financial, engineering. There are very strong reasons, or there are very compelling reasons where those kind of capabilities make a lot of sense. And actually today, I think people are getting a lot of that value from form factors that are less than, you know, lightweight and comparable. If you're doing a short kind of distributed engineering design session, putting on a VR headset is not terrible for, you know, 60 minutes or so. 60 minutes to 2 hours, it starts to get really a little bit uncomfortable, but that will continue to improve. There are smaller and smaller form factors, things like the big screen, like super tiny OLEDs. I think we're in for an exciting time in the wearable and plus AI space, and it's getting easier and easier for people to do homegrown solutions. So as the kind of underlying hardware becomes available, and it's not just locked up in labs that have, you know, kind of have it behind closed doors, then you might start to see a lot more form factors, a lot more kind of ubiquitous kind of different kind of approaches, much like you do with smartphones nowadays.
Yeah, I would imagine there's probably tons of defense tech applications as well, right? You know,
it's no coincidence that you know, Palmer Luckey has his defense company. Defense and tech is always, and as well as the biggest buyer of HoloLens has been the US military. So yeah, I think especially given the state of the world these days, that tends to drive a lot of innovation.
Okay, so then you also talked about your time at Starbucks. I'm curious, like, what were some of the cool things that you noticed from your time there in terms of
Yeah.
emerging kind of concepts?
Well, first of all, I loved my time at Starbucks. Such a interesting corporate company in terms of I really felt the people there cared about their people, about the
Mm-hmm.
customer. Um, I hadn't, I've been most of my time spent in kind of technology companies or in the entrepreneurial world, startup world. So coming back to a corporate world that wasn't a Microsoft of yesteryear, where it was maybe at certain times a little bit like ancient Rome. I think it's changed for the better nowadays, but I was super impressed with the caliber of people. And I was actually very surprised how far ahead they were in terms of their data infrastructure and actually very early AI or work in AI that had been going on for a number of years, but really helped to be, I think, a precursor to what we're seeing today in terms of retailers and other companies taking advantage of AI. My team, we were experimenting, we were the emerging tech team. So we worked across the company, identifying opportunities where we saw the ability to make a difference or to test things. Really, it's about hypothesis testing, saying either here's a problem that we think an early stage technology might be able to, make an impact on, or here's a technology that we think could have ramifications for a certain set of problems. So we did some work around digital twins, visualizing the entire corporate infrastructure and thinking about how you might do better business analysis by being able to viscerally, in a three-dimensional environment, kind of view the different aspects of a corporation like Starbucks. You have a lot of physical retail, you have farms, you have manufacturing. We did some work around voice AI at the drive-throughs, which was interesting to understand kind of at that time what the state of the art was. And, you don't really see that today. And there are reasons why you don't see that. We looked at robotics and automation, and in some ways, when I joined the company, I expected to go and say, well, we should have cleaning robots and we should have robots bringing people cups of coffee. And, I had to really internalize what differentiates Starbucks and the personal experience and the way they built that company was kind of the antithesis of some of that kind of maybe more tech forward stuff I was suggesting. And so, it was a good reminder to start with human-centered design. I had a great team that was actually already very entrenched in human-centered design. And it was a good refresher and just a great experience for me to kind of look at that stuff. But we were looking at wearables there as well, which was super fascinating, just to think about how can you make it easier for a partner at a Starbucks store to get the work done that they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you say Starbucks emerging experiences, my mind went to, I walk in, it uses facial recognition to know who I am. It knows what my normal order is, and it has all my payment information.
Right.
I just go and I pick it up.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I could see why that's kind of soulless, and it might not feel like, the living room experience, and maybe there's some value to the interaction with the barista when you're ordering. That's a tough one.
They did some. Well, you can go to stores today. I think there's one in Manhattan, which was a partnership with Amazon around their technology. And,
right.
I think it's a matter of fit. It's not everything. If you've got a busy metropolis area where people are kind of like, I just want to grab my coffee and go. I'm not here for the hanging out by the fire today type experience. Then why not have an offering for them? So yeah, I expect whether it's Starbucks or any other retailer, you're going to see a lot more kind of customized experiences versus a one size fits all for different kind of formats, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine if there were a challenger to Starbucks that was highly automated, but somehow managed to produce a better product in terms of like fresher, perfectly made coffee for you, and they didn't have to offer the living room experience,
Right.
like I could see that being kind of disruptive to
It's
Starbucks.
possible.
Yeah.
It's possible. Yeah, so I think Starbucks has gone through a lot of transformation over its years. They've got a new CEO, so it'll be interesting
Mhm.
to see what happens there. But the one thing that resonated with me was, I was there during the pandemic, so I had a slightly different employ. I've never even sat at my desk at the corporate headquarters. All of it was remote from here.
Mhm.
So, the drive-through lines during the pandemic were massive, and
Mm.
people wanted that little kind of treat for themselves, that little sense of grounding, that comfort of a cup of Starbucks that for many is an important part of their routine, an important part of normalcy. And so there's a lot of non-technical, really just very traditional retail that Starbucks does really, really well. And it's hard to capture that lightning in the bottle. And you haven't seen many other players really kind of disrupt them in a big way yet, especially in regions like China, where they've been expanding and looking to continue to grow. But it's still a very unique beast, and it was fascinating to kind of see it from the inside.
Yeah. And then you went from there to building UI for a rocket company? What was
Yeah.
that like? I can't even imagine what that's
It
like.
was wild. It was wild. Astrospace is headquartered in Alameda in a gigantic former F-18 engine testing facility. So massive warehouse
Yeah.
with engine or rocket engine testing facilities just outside of San Francisco. I would fly down from Seattle down there, once or so a month for a week, and my team was distributed. But it was one of the most exciting times of my career. The CEO, Chris Kemp, I'd gotten to know when he was CIO at NASA JPL. I was working on photosynth around, scanning the underside of the space shuttle and trying to find damage on the tiles while it was in space. And so he and I had a great couple of years collaborating, working together. He was a big supporter during my time with 8/9, and it was a real opportunity to work. I'm a geek. I love space. I love technology, and to actually be sitting here, I've got a 65-inch TV. That's my monitor here, and for launches, I'd have about 15 or 20 camera streams live from Cape Canaveral. A week before launch, you are really like locked down, heads, a lot of nervous energy, a lot of really dedicated people making sure that it goes as smoothly as possible. And we were only the 4th private company to get into orbit. Just fascinating to dive into an area that I had zero expertise on, but it was an interesting blend of cultures. There were people from Apple, Google, Microsoft, SpaceX, Blue Origin, like very different cultures. And in some ways, I think that was part of the challenge of a new company that was, had raised $500 million and was trying to, disrupt the space industry. But as we all know, there's some pretty stiff competition there. And so product market fit for delivery of satellites into low Earth orbit is a real challenge with massive capital costs, unlike software. My focus was really how do we make sure that the software to launch the rocket gives as much information as possible to the launch controllers. It was very, very rudimentary when my team and I first got there. But over time, in collaboration with many others, we had a pretty refined system. And then I was starting to explore more, how do we ensure the red team, the guys with wrenches and screwdrivers on the launch pad that are getting the rocket ready for flight, how do we ensure they're in safe areas? How do we ensure that, you're around helium and nitrogen and all kinds of nasty stuff that can be a real problem? So I was kind of exploring location systems in a very wide area so that we could know with a good deal of surety that they were not in harm's way. So I enjoyed it. It was a fascinating experience.
Yeah, that sounds like a once in a lifetime opportunity. So kudos to you for taking advantage of that. Now let's shift gears and talk about solopreneurship in the age of AI. I have been doing a lot of experimentation myself,
I've
I'm
been
blown
watching
away.
your work. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's your experience been like?
Well, I, having been an entrepreneur for 10 years, I think it takes a special kind of craziness to put yourself through that level of challenge. I have a huge respect for anyone it could be a janitor, it could be anyone you like. Anyone who is an entrepreneur, they are a special type of person. And I wasn't ready to jump back into that after my experiences with some of these other larger companies. Mostly because my risk profile has changed. I've got a young family. I've got 2 young kids. I'm married now. It's not just myself, and I can just kind of roll the dice and hope things turn out okay. So, but I am always going to want to look at a new business opportunity or see a technology and think about its opportunity from a business perspective. And so the lens I've been looking at this through is, how can I, at the lowest cost possible, i.e. the lowest risk possible, how can I prove whether a minimal viable product is viable or not? And I mean, like, as quickly as I can, as cheaply as I can, with just my own resources and knowledge for the most part. Is that viable? And so this has been a little bit of a journey. I am by no means an expert on this. There are some folks I would highly recommend anyone who is interested in this go take a look at. Peter Levels is one guy who is just really, I think, kind of the guru of this space. Levels.io is his Twitter alias, and you should 100% follow him. He's just a fascinating and very humble guy, I think, in terms of he works out in the open. He's currently doing about $420,000 a month with 8 or 9 single website app, web app type experiences he's created. Obviously, you're trusting that he's being transparent and legitimate, but I actually believe he is. He recently was on Lex Friedman's podcast. He started Nomad's List, and when I started to become familiar with him and his work, I was like, well, why don't I give this a go? Now, he is an engineer. He's a developer. I am no longer an engineer or developer. I'm an engineer by training, so I know enough to be dangerous and can read code, but I am not super familiar with all the frameworks and languages out there. So I wanted to see what I could do. When ChatGPT first launched, I thought, well, I'll just describe what I want, and this thing can write code. And so I installed Visual Studio. I described an idea. My idea at the time was, I want to take a book and basically take little paragraph segments like Alice in Wonderland and generate an image with it. ChatGPT and Midjourney were all the rage all that long time ago, a couple of years ago. And I basically used ChatGPT to create using WordPress and MongoDB, a very rough prototype. That was, good enough. I didn't launch it, but it was good enough for me to kind of be a barometer test on my own to say, I think that I could maybe use this as an approach. From there, I'm a productivity nerd. I'm really into things like getting things done, Obsidian, Notion. Like, for me, it gives me some level of control over multiple projects, both work and personal. And I'm also a very visual person. So I've always had this little idea in my head of, wouldn't it be great if I could take either my to-do list or my calendar and visualize all of the different aspects of that list or calendar in a very visceral way. And so the idea for my kind of little MVP was to basically kind of take something like Todoist, a popular to-do app or to-do list app, and something like Flux AI or Midjourney, where you can upload several images of yourself, train it on your images, and then create an image of yourself in any scenario. So when I think about busy days where I'm meeting a client, I'm dropping the kids off at school, I'm having lunch with an old colleague, I need a transit from one place to another, then I am, meeting friends for dinner and I'm working on these emails. Like, it starts, I think people are very bad at estimating, but if you can viscerally visualize that almost as like a linear kind of projection of what your day's going to look like, you might start to make different trade-offs and choices, or it might just be a fun little artifact and a way of remembering that particular day in the future. So that was the underlying premise, and then I tried a few more tools.
Yeah, that premise kind of makes sense, because I know a lot of people, myself included, often use Google Calendar as a to-do list where they're not meetings. They're like, well, I need to block time to do this task.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in both those instances where you were playing around with different kind of off-the-shelf AI tools, like how close did you come? Like for the first concept, did it spit out code that ran that actually you could make available, or was it got you 80% of the way there? Or
it was I think 80% is actually a pretty fair assessment. Basically it 100% spat out the code. I was copying, pasting, hitting build and run. And then, let me take a step back. So the first step I did, and where AI I think is useful, is to describe the idea. Basically say, I want you to help. I tend to oscillate between Anthropic, Claude, and ChatGPT. And so I think at this point I was using Claude, and
no Gemini for you.
I tried, and it's good in a few spots. I am optimistic they'll find their way.
There's a lot of money going into it.
Yeah, the Notebook LM stuff is super impressive. I recently wrote about that. But yeah, I said, let's help me create a product requirements document that basically describes the application, and that becomes your source of truth. It becomes it essentially knocks that together in a couple of minutes. You refine it a little bit, and then I asked it to take that PRD and to outline an architecture and an approach. And I knew there were some things I wanted to use. I wanted a responsive UI, web UI. I didn't want a native application. Actually wasn't interested in mobile for these experiments. So I kind of steered it towards a few different architecture decisions, and we iterated on that. And then from that, I asked it to start generating code. And this is where it starts to hit some of its, I would say, challenges. And when I initially was just using ChatGPT, I think I was doing the PRDs with Claude and Anthropic Claude, but then I was using ChatGPT to generate code, because at the time, ChatGPT was kind of leading in terms of code with their 4.0 model. The problem I was finding was I would get a module or a certain level of a certain key functionality working, and then I would hit either the limit of the context window. So I would go down a rabbit hole trying to debug a problem. Basically, I would run the code in Visual Studio. It would either work just fine, or there'll be a problem, like a build error or just something wrong in the user interface. I would take that error, put it back into the ChatGPT, and it would fix it. But then, because the context window is kind of this moving window, it forgets the bigger picture. And this is still fundamentally the challenge of things like Cursor, which is actually what I moved on to from just pure working with ChatGPT. I then moved to Cursor, which is really for, I would say, a more hardcore engineer. That is where there's the most traction today. It's basically Visual Studio with ChatGPT integrated into it. So I no longer have to kind of copy and paste little snapshots into ChatGPT. It's all integrated, and you can pick whatever model you want, whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI or Llama. You can do that all within a single integrated environment. However, the same problem still exists. The more you work with it, you basically start to lose the forest and the tree, or you get confused between the forest and trees, and it can't remember the full context without a bunch of clever prompting or starting a new conversation, giving it maybe a smaller submodule or a smaller segment of code to work with. Where it's really powerful is if, unlike me, you're already a smart engineer, you're able to look at the architecture and just say, okay, I just want you to work on this one facet of it. Here's the inputs I want. Here's the outputs I want. Just focus on this module. But as a solopreneur with limited, engineering experience, I was hitting a wall very quickly with that. And so I kind of threw all that away, and I moved on to something else.
What did you move on to?
So I did a little research on Reddit, and I was like, what is the top no-code or low-code framework for web apps or software as a service? And Bubble.io or Bubble has been around for a number of years. It is a kind of a visual interface, so you can essentially have a bunch of modules that you can drag and drop and then kind of click on and customize for whatever you're trying to achieve. I was able to get much further using Bubble.io, which also has an integrated database, which meant I wasn't having to kind of ramp up on two different technologies. I was able to get much further in doing the initial creation of this Todoist type clone just by asking the LLM, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude, asking the LLM, I want to do this in Bubble. How do I do it? And it would literally walk me through step by step. Click on this icon, drag it here, click on this field, type this in. I was really impressed by how quickly I was able to get a working visual prototype. I mean, up and running in basically a day. It didn't have all the integration into AI and Flux, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But from a low-code, no-code approach, I think Bubble seems to be a really good choice for somebody who's technical enough to kind of, and patient enough to kind of work through it. The challenge was there's no integrated LLM currently in Bubble, and so and there's no source code, or maybe there is, but it's obfuscated and I couldn't find it. So when I hit a problem in Bubble, what would I do? I would take a screenshot and then use ChatGPT's image modality and say, I want to add a button on the right side here. Tell me what to do. So what I was doing was basically copying and pasting screenshots from the Bubble interface into ChatGPT. It was analyzing it and then telling me what to do. This is where I hit some problems with Bubble. ChatGPT is trained on, it's trained on a moment in time, which is outdated. Bubble is an evolving platform. And so it would tell me to do something that no longer maybe exists because they might have changed their approach in Bubble, or it would maybe hallucinate and tell me to do something that didn't make sense. It very quickly became super unwieldy. And what I thought when I was trying to do something simple, I was just finding myself getting kind of more and more frustrated, copying and pasting between ChatGPT. ChatGPT would lose its context window and forget what I was doing in the same. So this context window problem is probably the biggest hurdle to try and overcome. But it was at least got further than just working with pure code alone.
Yeah, it seems like a matter of time before the Bubble guys integrate ChatGPT or something like that natively into.
I'm sure.
Bubble, right?
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, I will likely go back to Bubble with some more of my experimentation. And there's a really active subreddit and discords on this. I would recommending having a poke around the Bubble subreddit if you're kind of curious about whether this could be a viable solution for you.
Wow. So do you think you could have gotten to a place if you wanted to actually have like a competitor to the to-do list apps out there of your own?
Todoist is pretty refined, but for a simple
like
to-do
Google
list
Keep or something like that.
Oh yeah, I think that is a very, very viable proposition. And people have created a lot more sophisticated applications. It's a mature product, so I wouldn't go as far to say like you could build a pure competitor, but a simple web-based to-do list. I have no doubt you could build something quite like that.
And something that was scalable enough that could support like thousands of users. That sophisticated. Wow.
Great. They have they've got some great examples on the site of pretty well scaled applications. Of course, there's some of the downsides there are you're locked into their ecosystem. You are building on their platform, and the scope for my kind of barometer for this was really around MVP.
Yeah.
All I'm interested in is signal. I don't expect to have. This is all throwaway code in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there's signal, I can either hire developers to go build the real engineering or raise money around it. But I think more and more that's going to be the new norm. I think is people just trying what they can as quickly as they can, and that's where I think Claude's showing some real leadership with this artifacts capability. Where you can describe the application you want just using the Claude interface. And it does a really pretty impressive job. Nowhere near as sophisticated as kind of a traditional web app, but for like a quick personal app, things like tips, calculators, and small data entry type applications. They have a bunch of examples on their site that are actually even more sophisticated than that. But Claude Artifacts, I think, hints at the future that we're likely to move towards, which is no longer these monolithic apps where somebody creates everything in one, unique point of view package and deploys it on an app store. I think we're going to move towards a future where applications are created on the fly. An AI will cobble together the services or the microservices and then present a UI that makes sense for the context you're in. Could be on your glasses, could be on your phone, could be in your ears. I'm very bullish on kind of this microservices, agents, really building the applications of the future. And I think that will probably be the most disruptive thing we'll see in the near term, is a movement away from these kind of, here's an application that everyone has a single experience with. Everyone will have a hyper-personalized experience that will be cobbled together on the fly. And both Gates and many others have written about this as well, which I'm a big believer in.
Yeah, it kind of aligns with this theme that I've noticed as well around AI kind of breaking down a lot of barriers to creativity and development, where in the old days, if you might have an ideas person, but you'd always have to find the hacker to connect with that person.
That's right.
And maybe Claude and ChatGPT are your virtual hacker now, and you just need a bunch of hustlers.
That's my hope. I do think we're gonna see a lot more folks like Levels.io start to show that approach, and it's great. I mean, I'd certainly like for other people with great ideas to be able to start a business, get rewarded for their work without all those barriers to entry that we currently have today. Even though that's gotten so much easier in the cloud era, where you no longer need those servers and infrastructure. Although maybe we're moving back to that now, as people need, they're worried about giving some of the cloud AI providers their data, or they want to train their own models locally. I think the pendulum might be swinging back to companies having at least some of their AI compute on premises versus in the cloud. We'll see how that pans out. It's I think still early days for that.
Yeah, there has been talk even around disruption to like enterprise software businesses, where people are saying, well, why do I need Salesforce or Slack? I can just put my own together with one decent engineer and ChatGPT, and we can build our own internal CRM system.
Yeah.
Do you see that world where it's like these little backyard kind of software development teams that every company uses, and then that's pretty seismic for all of the SaaS companies out there then?
It is. I think it depends, like everything. Security, scale, reliability, all the things that an enterprise values are hard to do. Outside of pure functionality, those things I think are a little bit harder for a non-technical group or team to run. So I don't know if that's going away anytime soon. Of course, maybe, with everything these days, maybe once we hit AGI, everyone's problems of every kind are solved. So we'll see if Sam Altman's correct with that in the next 5 to 10 years or not. But I oscillate myself between things like, you mentioned CRMs. I was recently looking at CRMs for my own business, and I tried maybe 5 or 6 different trials. I've easily tried 10 different CRMs over the years. I use Notion because it's just enough. It's super simple. I can create a CRM application in a couple of hours, and it integrates with a lot of the other things that are important for me. So I'm a big fan of Notion. I really like what they've done. I haven't seen a lot more competition to them currently. There's a few that are have slightly different offerings or different approaches. What everyone wants in Notion is for it to be an offline local solution, but they've refused to kind of go that way yet. But maybe that'll change over time. But people creating their own applications for their own individual use cases, I think that will be much more commonplace. And so depending on whether we're talking enterprise scale or individual scale, you might start to see some new players emerge in that space.
Yeah, I am in agreement that it's not clear that every little company is going to just roll their own thing
Yeah,
and cancel all their SaaS subscriptions.
yeah,
I could see another scenario where the equivalent of like Kirkland software, like Costco low
right.
cost CRM,
Yeah,
because like, okay, it's not going to have all the bells and whistles of Salesforce, but it's going to work and do what you need and cost like
yeah.
20% of what you
I,
pay
I think
Salesforce.
that's a super interesting insight, Tom, because um, I think you are going to see these different tiers of AI based upon their capability, the level of compute and energy those things require. You're already starting to hear hints of that with things like Sora from OpenAI, which is
Mm-hmm.
super compute intensive. Sora is the text to video
Mm-hmm.
capability that's similar to runway ML. I mean, just mind blowing in terms of capability, but also quite expensive to produce. A good deal of content. So I do think there will need to be some kind of a basic. In the same way you might have basic internet access or high speed access. I think citizens of countries will probably get some level of basic AI access,
Mm-hmm.
and then for different things you're gonna purchase different levels of capability for AI. These will probably be the new business models of the future, with different subscription tiers for different levels of capability. I might have the budget airlines travel planner if I'm just trying to book a quick flight to California, but I might have the gold tier Expedia booking agent for an international trip with lot more complexity. So yeah, this is where I think it's with any single one of these technologies, you can't look at them in isolation. It's the combination that will unlock the new potential. For you need to have attribution and something like the blockchain in order to have agents that are going off doing all these things and somehow ensure that the originator of that agent is getting paid. And so it's going to be AI plus blockchain plus wearables that have context, all of these, and high speed networks. All of these things, when they hit together, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that's where the big unlocks are going to come. And I think we're starting to see that kind of flywheel spin up right now as AI is starting to get sprinkled into everything.
Well, Adam, it has been a very fast 30 minutes that turned into 57 minutes. So
Yes.
there's so much to talk about. I do want to kind of wrap up with two things. One is we should talk about how people can follow your adventures and hear about your latest insights. So let's start with that, and then I'll wrap with who do you think will be the biggest winners in this AI kind of race?
Mm.
But
Mm.
first, how can people kind of stay in touch with
Sure.
you?
My handle on Twitter is ASHEP, ASHEPP, or I'm at adamsheppard.org. And my Shep report is available at theshepreport.com. And currently it's open to everyone. It's I tend to write once or twice a month. So that's the best way to get in touch with me. If anyone's got an exciting new AI focused initiative, I am kind of exploring all kinds of opportunities. So would love to hear from you, especially if it's in an emerging tech space. And I'm openly consulting as an independent on almost any vertical you can think of. I've kind of touched on over the years. So that's very kind of you, and would love to get in touch if anyone's interested in chatting.
Great. Well, people can make sure they subscribe to the Shep Report. I kind of like that you don't publish every week, so there's you can put time into it, and it's
Yeah,
thoughtful and
thank
well
you.
researched. Yeah. So
Yeah.
So last question, like, who's the winner here?
Yeah.
Everybody's pouring money into AI. Like, do you think there is going to be a winner, one winner, or is it, you know, is Llama the big winner? Who's going to win here?
I think the biggest gating factor is the energy and silicon constraints. And so I think if it's a pure software play, you know, plenty of people will make good money building on top of these things, but the real winners, honestly, are going to be the big tech companies. I just don't see how anyone can truly compete against the level of resources that they all have. And that's the usual suspects, right? Really just all the major big tech companies. I'd like to see a distributed approach. I don't know enough about the how that works from a economics perspective. Like, could everyone's phone, everyone's computer, everyone's electronics that has some kind of CPU cycles be working on AI, be part of a broader AI network to compete against the big techs? I don't know whether that's viable or not, but I would say all the major big tech companies are going to have their cake and eat it too. They're going to be running the infrastructure. They're going to be running the cloud services. They're going to be running storage. They have you're seeing them doing things like basically firing up power stations to nuclear power stations to actually power the level of compute needed. So there's really no other entities on the planet that can afford to do this outside of governmental, and governmental and private sector at that level, they go hand in hand. So the big winners will be big tech, and we'll see what happens with NVIDIA. We'll see what happens with Intel. There's more complexity on the hardware and chip side of things because of the socio global economics and the fact that we're seeing more and more balkanization between countries now. So you probably won't be able to buy chips in Russia ever again. US chips will probably never legitimately ship to Russia or China again, and we need to build our own infrastructure for some of these things. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of this stuff pans out, because the capability is such a step leap forward that as we all know, with things like responsible AI and just making sure we have systems that are safe for people, there is a lot of stuff to be figured out on those fronts, and things are moving at a pace that I don't think anyone really truly has understood and internalized. We're in for a wild ride, and I'm here for it. I think you can't put the genie back in the bottle, so the best thing you can do is to try and shape it, and that's what I want to be involved with. I'm reinvigorated for this next revolution.
Well, Adam, let me ask you this question, which is, I'm going to be talking my own book a little bit here, but I've recently made two small investments. One was into OpenAI at an exorbitant valuation, like 150 billion. Which I kind of felt like, man, I can't miss on this, but on the other, like, I don't want to pass this up.
Sure.
And then the other part of me was like, 150 billion. Like, do I have any chance of 10xing this? So I'm curious. So that's one investment I made recently. And another was around modular, like nuclear power development.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, we should look at this video a year from now.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Do you think those were two? How would you grade those two investments? You won't hurt my feelings, because
I think they're super smart investments, Tom. If it's a frothy market, there's a lot of hype, but hopefully that's built into the price. I do think nuclear will continue to grow and evolve, especially as our energy needs increase. Fusion is and cold fusion is still in the labs, but there's a lot of promise there. So there's a chance some of that might get disrupted, but over what time horizon, I don't know. And then, of course, if AGI hits, then it'll just go tell us what we need to build, or just build it itself as the robots come online. So it's probably I've probably never been less certain about my own intuition than I am today, because nobody knows how far this thing's going to take us. And I love hearing the little tidbits that leak out here and there, whether it's a ChatGPT engineer or Anthropic or elsewhere, where they kind of talk about what they've seen behind closed doors. And these are very smart people that I don't think are necessarily kind of spreading hyperbole. So, maybe there won't be a financial market in the future anyway, Tom. So it's all a wash. I don't know.
Well,
we'll all enjoy our universal basic income and sitting on the beach. Maybe that'll be where it ends.
I would be okay with that for sure. When they have our robots like clean the bathrooms and do all the toiling work, that's great.
I'll be first in line for that. That sounds great. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have to get you back on at least in a year. And it'll be fun to talk about, like, okay, where did we get it wrong in our conversation way back in September of 2024?
Yeah.
And then what we think is exciting about the future. And in the meantime, people should check out thesheppreport.com.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, Adam.
I really enjoyed this. So great. Hey. See you, Tom. Thanks as always. Appreciate
always
it.
A pleasure, my friend. Take care, buddy.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, team. That was a fun conversation. Yeah, Shep is a cool dude. Definitely big thinker, and always kind of looking at the big picture. And he's got sort of a, kind of classic lifelong learner, always curious about stuff. So always find it energizing to catch up with Adam. Some quick takeaways from my side before I wrap up. Let me just tell you about 2 or 3 things before I give you my personal 3 takeaways from my conversation with Adam. But this is kind of like the commercial break here. So first is, if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free to my Substack, which is firesidepm.substack.com. And as you can see here, I kind of have nice summaries of previous Fireside PM interviews, including, you'll see the one that I did with Shep, hopefully in a few days. The other thing is, I've got a class that I'm teaching coming up around, if you're a PM and you do a lot of product reviews, I've got a kind of master class on how to nail your next product review. And it's very interactive kind of workshop. We'll go over how to frame the review, the exec summary, laying out key kind of tables of option slides, as well as practice actually presenting and fielding questions. As someone who's been in hundreds of product reviews, it's always a fun class to teach. And then last thing is, if you need any one-on-one coaching, you can go to tomleungcoaching.com. I'm currently working with a number of product leads and founders of venture-backed startups who are using me as a safe space to kind of think through some hard questions and get some a second opinion on various things. So that's tomleungcoaching.com. Okay, so let's go to my takeaways. 3 things. One was how with ChatGPT and its equivalents and some of these new tools for no code app development, I do think that there's like a whole category of ideas people who now can build an MVP potentially without a hacker. So hustlers are now being, it's like maybe in the old days you needed to have a professional driver to operate like a motor vehicle, like I don't know, back in the like way old days. And now it's like, oh no, there's automatic transmission and there's navigation and you can just drive wherever you want. And similarly with stuff like bubble.io, it sounds like Adam had some decent experiences with that one. It's like, oh wow, I can do more than just paint a front door. I can actually build a little mini app and get people to play around with it. So it's like, going from Figma to actual like working code. So that's kind of cool. I think the second takeaway is it still doesn't replace the core problem that Adam talked about, which is I need to find signal. I need to confirm or determine if there's true customer interest in this idea I have. So now that can I build it, maybe the threshold has been much lowered. The question now we're trying to really focus it on is, should I build it? Or does the world need this new technology or software? Which has always been the problem with founders and early stage entrepreneurship. I mean, you could see this with back in the day with the engineer founders who could build whatever they could think of. But the bigger issue is like, does the world need that thing that they're building? So, and that's something that thus far AI has not been able to do for us. It hasn't been able to say like, oh, hey, what do you think are the chances that there will be demand for this new visual to-do list? It could talk about who your competitors are and maybe help you estimate the TAM, but building the MVP or doing the user interviews and validating the demand, so far, you still need a hustler or product person or ideas person or hustler to do. So so that's point two, is that you still need that judgment. And I think point three is, I guess we wrapped with no one really knows who the biggest winners are going to be. I mean, I certainly agree with Adam that big tech has definitely, positioned itself to do really well. Will they be the biggest winners when you factor in all the money they put in? I don't know. I actually think, now that I think about it, the biggest winners might be the people who previously had to pay enormous rents to gigantic tech companies for software. And given that the cost to write software is probably going to go down exponentially, and maybe if you can use AI to then maintain that software at a much lower cost, what you're going to find is that, the dirty little secret for a lot of tech companies is the products that exist that are doing really well, most of the value is fulfilled by the version of the product they had many years ago. And they're always like refining it and making it a little bit faster and adding a few features here. But generally, the value being offered is really fulfilled by the basics, the P0 features that were in that original PRD. And so, maybe I'll make a prediction here. I think there is a place for that Costco Kirkland equivalent to software, where they basically say, look, we're not going to have the latest, greatest features, but you know what? If you need a really basic presentation capability, like here's the version of Google Slides or PowerPoint, and instead of, you know, $1 a month, it might be like $1 a year. Or, you know, here's a super basic email offering, and instead of a few bucks a month, it might be a few bucks a year. Same thing with CRM, you know, applicant tracking systems, whatever. You know, because that point of diminishing returns, you usually hit that after version 2 or maybe even earlier. And in the old days, if you're a customer of those tools, like, well, what are you going to do? Like, you need that capability. There wasn't a Kirkland software option, but I think there might be more in the future, because what does it take to build the Kirkland software? You know, you need a few engineers, benefit from a lot of AI, access to stable infrastructure. So this is where, you know, maybe, you know, that still means that you need the AWSs or Azures or GCPs, but everything above that, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the equivalent of those like virtual mobile cellular networks. They buy a bunch of, you know, capacity from T-Mobile and then resell it. You know, they buy it at wholesale and then resell it for just a little bit more. And you know, like whatever, Ryan Reynolds, I think, did that. And so maybe there's going to be something like that for software. Maybe all those SaaS things that companies rely on, there's going to be that Costco version. So that's my bet. It's not really a bet on AI, but it's a bet on AI dramatically compressing the cost to develop and maintain software, allowing for kind of low cost providers to attack kind of the fat public or, you know, late stage venture backed startups. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. And again, if you want to subscribe to the Substack, it's Fireside PM. Also, I have an audio version of this live stream that's available wherever you listen to podcasts, Fireside PM. And then if you are a person that is doing a lot of product reviews and you get kind of nervous about them, or you got feedback that they're not going as well as you want, feel free to check out my class on Maven, which starts, I have a cohort starting next week. So first week of October, for those of you who are watching this in September. All right, I will see you all later. Let's get back to work. Bye, team.